Today we're looking at two identical bikes from Ragley, except one's made out of aluminum and one's made out of steel. Which one's better? This is an experiment I've been really excited about. I was able to compare the Ragley Big Al directly to the Ragley Bigwig one day after the other with the exact same parts on the exact same trail. Both of these bikes are fantastic bikes. They were a ton of fun to ride, and I have dedicated reviews on each one. Now, our brains naturally try to compartmentalize information, and a lot of people like to latch onto one single variable when comparing bikes, and they weigh that one variable as if it's the only variable to take into account. For example, steel is real, or steel is always more supple, or aluminum is always harsh, or 29s always ride like this and 27.5s always ride like this. If there's one thing I've learned reviewing all these bikes and being in the industry for so long, it's that you can almost never boil everything down to one variable. So when people ask me a question, should I go 29 or 27.5 or aluminum or steel? The correct answer is, it depends, because that's not the only thing that's different. However, in this case, with these two frames, that is the only thing that's different. This bike is the aluminum version of this bike. Even the Ragley guys said, hey, we're curious what you find out. We've never built both bikes with the same exact parts and taken them side by side to see what they're like. This has been a super fun experiment. The Bigwig was 1.7 pounds heavier than the Big Al. That's significant as a frame. In fact, this is 75% the weight of this. So you've got a big weight savings between the two. But that's only on the frame. When we put all of the same parts on it, does that translate? Can you still feel it? Absolutely. That 1.7 pound difference is huge, and it's very noticeable. So how do these two frames compare in the ride feel? This Big Al is extremely forgiving for an aluminum bike. It's softer than a lot of steel frames. It's softer than any Chromag I've ever ridden. It's more forgiving than the RSD Middle Child steel. It's more forgiving than the old Hanzo STs. I haven't ridden the 2021 yet. This is about as supple as the Canfield Nimble 9, maybe slightly more supple than the Nimble 9. And the Bigwig did have the steel is real feel. It felt nice and comfortable. I would say the Bigwig is 5% more supple than the Big Al. It muted all those micro vibrations. It almost felt like having cush core in the tires without having cush core in the tires. It just prevented a lot of the high frequency vibrations from ever making it to your body. And that was a really welcome feel, and I love that feel. However, the weight was noticeable on this bike. And this bike isn't unique. It's the Norco Torrent. It's the Hanzo ESD. It's the RSD Middle Child steel. It's all of these steel hardcore hardtails have that weight to them. A good hardtail is so special, and it's better than a full suspension in a lot of ways. Not every way, but a lot of ways. A good hardtail is excited to attack the trail. It is efficient. It sprints when you put down power. It accelerates. When you pump corners, it's responsive and it reacts to that. And it might sound like I'm describing an XC bike. I'm not. I don't think that's the ideal hardtail experience. It could be in some cases. But these 32 to 34 pound complete bikes don't have that feeling. They're missing out on what makes a hardtail fantastic, in my opinion, which is that eagerness to get up to speed, to stand up and sprint and get up something, to sneak in a pedal stroke between corners to keep your speed up and just have that roller coaster ride where you're just flowing and you're in your zen moment with the trail and you and the trail become one. And I felt that in this review, especially when it was back to back. It was super noticeable because the Big Al the day before was energetic. It was excited. It was so fun. And it just put this big smile on my face. And I just wanted to sprint up every hill. I wanted to pop off of everything. I wanted to hit everything a little bit faster because it had that excitement. It had that special sauce. The Bigwig was a little more subdued, a little more chill. It didn't really want to get up to speed because it didn't really come alive when you did on the climbs and the flats. But it was just like, I'll put up with this until it's time to get steep and chunky and fast, and then I'll show you what I like. And this bike was less versatile. It was more hungry for that steep, fast tech and chunk. And that's where this bike came alive, whereas the Big Al was alive on everything. I also feel like the Big Al had a slightly stiffer frame in terms of power delivery. So when I would stand up and sprint, I felt like the bike was there with me. It's the feeling you get on a lot of carbon frames too. You just put the power down and it translates into forward motion. The Bigwig, I'm not feeling flex on it. It could just be the weight, but when you get up and stand, it's just kind of like, oh, this again? Okay, we'll get up it. Whereas the Big Al was just excited and energetic. The Bigwig was kind of subdued, kind of mellow. The Big Al was super exciting. It wasn't harsh. At the end of the day, I noticed a little bit more fatigue in my wrists and ankles, a little bit, probably 5% more. But my smile was bigger riding the Big Al. I pumped stuff more. I caught more air. I had more energy. I attacked the trail. Whereas with the Bigwig, I was just kind of like hanging out, being chill, not pushing it at all, waiting for that steep, really chunky thing where gravity could do all the work. The Big Al was fine with me doing the work, and it felt like the more work I put in, the more I got back from the Big Al. Whereas on the Bigwig, the more work I was putting into this, it just took more energy. It didn't really wake the bike up more. So if you're mostly on gravity-fed trails where it's mostly downhill, you don't really look forward to the climbs, you just put your seat up and winch up the fire road, like I think of Tiger Mountain in Seattle. That's got a really nice climb, it's flowy, no real big moves, you just kind of sit and spin for an hour until you're at the top. Then when you go down, it's steep enough and fast enough to take advantage of a bike like this. Where I live, we do have a lot of rocks and we do have some steep downhills, so you can benefit from that steel frame, but we also have every 2 minutes this little 30-second climb and this sprint and this punch, and that's where the Big Al really came alive. I was looking forward to the climbs as much as the downs, and a lot of people when they hear that, they think I'm just an XC guy. I'm not an XC guy. I just ride bikes on any trail, and to me, I would much rather have the Big Al than the Bigwig. The ride feel was almost the same, but the weight was noticeably better and the bike was snappier, funner, more exciting. It made me want to pedal fast. It made me attack the trail, and my grin was bigger. The Bigwig is cool and it's a cool bike, but it's not quite as much fun as the Big Al. So there's the big surprise. A lot of people would choose the Bigwig on paper, and it's still a fantastic bike. And if you have a Bigwig, kudos to you. It's a great bike. But I think hardtails lose some of what make hardtails wonderful when they're too heavy. And that 1.7 pound difference was absolutely noticeable. So there you have it. I know some of you are triggered by this. Don't take it personally. This is nothing personal. Most of the time I would choose the steel bike, but I have felt that lately steel bikes are getting heavier and heavier and heavier, which makes sense. We're pushing them harder and harder, and they need to be able to withstand the abuse we're going to put through them. And most people buying steel bikes are abusing them, or abuse is the wrong word, but they're taking them off bigger and bigger features and bigger trails. So they have to be made a little bit stronger to put up with that. If anything, this just speaks to how good the Big Al is. This is a very special frame. The Big Al is like that kid who goes to school on the first day of school and he's so excited, he can't wait to learn. He gets there early to class, he sets up, opens his notebook, his pencils are sharp, and he's ready to go. The Bigwig wakes up 15 minutes late and is like, oh man, is it school again? Summer's over. And he drags himself to class, forgot his books, and it takes him a month to get woken up again and excited for school again. Both great bikes, totally different attitudes about them. The Big Al is truly something special. It's one of my favorite all-rounder bikes, and it's one of those bikes that if someone doesn't want to pay for my consultation services and they just ask me, what bike should I buy? Big Al is toward the top of that list. I don't care where you live. I don't care what you ride. The Big Al will be fun on it. Now, there are certain bikes I would recommend more for this for certain types of riding in certain areas, and that's why I have my bike consultation service. So if you are stuck and not knowing which hardtail to get, or you're overwhelmed, or you're wondering how bike A compares to bike B, that's why I have my consultation service. This is my job. I'm a professional bike reviewer and a professional consultant to help people find the right bikes. Personally, I don't care if you end up on a Specialized or a Trek or a Ragley. It's all the same to me. So I'll make a recommendation that helps you enjoy your trails the most. To sign up for that, you can go to patreon.com/hardtailparty. We'll work together until you find the perfect bike for what you want, and then you can cancel the service and you got what you needed out of it. That's how I support myself. That's how I support my family. That's how I put food on the table. And I really appreciate your support with this. I also really appreciate Ragley for sending these in. This has been a super fun experiment. And I need to make sure I'm clear. Just because the Big Al rides 95% as the Bigwig does not mean some other company's aluminum bike will ride 95% as good as their steel one. That is not what I'm trying to say at all. There are so many bikes in aluminum that I would never want for my personal bike. They just feel like a Walmart bike. They feel stiff. They feel rigid. They just translate a whole bunch of feedback to you. Go back and watch some of the stiff aluminum bikes I've ridden. The Commensal Meta HT AM, hated that bike. The Ruroc Conleon, really cool bike, but it was too stiff for me. This Big Al, also made out of aluminum like those other two, completely different riding experience. The Big Al, the Santa Cruz Chameleon, and the Banshee Paradox V3 are three of the most comfortable, exciting aluminum bikes I've ever ridden, and they ride better than 90% of the steel bikes I've tried. That said, if you're looking for the most comfortable, the most compliant, the one that reduces the most chatter, some steel bikes are really special out there and have a really, really good ride feel to them, and that might be what you're looking for. Thanks for getting experimental with me in this series and learning there's a party in the mountains and you're invited.